If I put labels on myself, I would say I'm born in the 40s, purely heterosexual woman, married with 3 kids, lived in the burbs, gay meant happy, and I thought, how dare they steal that word? That's our word, that's my generation's word. When our daughter came out, I thought of her as my son. 34 years old, married with 2 children, one aged 9 and one aged 4. And she lived interstate, and I feel a tiny wincy bit hurt that she had never trusted me enough to come out earlier, but it was a different generation, and I think she knew her father particularly couldn't have accepted at that stage. I don't think. I think I would have, but Dad wouldn't have. And Dad's been amazing too. Once it was all out, I said, she's my daughter. You know, we never for 1 nanosecond thought of rejecting her in any way. My daughter rang me from her interstate home, and she said, she was crying, and she said, Mum, I want to be a woman. In fact, I am a woman. And I said, what? It just didn't compute. I was in total denial. I said, what do you mean? And she said, I've always felt since I was this high that I was a woman, that I was a little girl I wanted to be. And I said, but how can that be? You've got married and you've had children. And she began to explain how she'd felt and how she'd had to hide everything and push her feelings aside and conform to society and how they thought she should be. And I said to her, I think you should really go and see a psychiatrist. And I said it as kindly as I could. I was concerned for her, I was worried about her. And she was crying and she said, I'll lose my children. I said, no you won't. How can you lose your children? You can get divorced and you'll still see your children. Ha ha. She sees one of them. She hasn't seen her son for 17 years. And when she first came out, I think fear. Oh, that was the fear that I had, that she would be thought of as a freak, that she would be bashed. And then there was the toilet issue. Oh, how many times I worried. Like, she began going to nightclubs. She went through like a second adolescence in a way, because she had to experiment with makeup and find herself as a female. As a 4-year-old, my granddaughter went to kindy, and she was asked to draw a picture of her family, and she drew her aunt with a dress on and said, this is my uncle, because she hadn't quite, got her head around the new person in the family yet, but she knew that a dress was appropriate for her uncle to wear. And the teacher said, Kimberly, men don't wear dresses. And she said, oh yes they do. In the beginning, I was lost. I was grieving the loss of my child. I didn't have a grave. Like, that child had disappeared. That man had gone, and I didn't know where he went to. It was such a confusing emotion. He'd gone into the ether. He'd disappeared from our lives, and people said, but you've got your daughter. And I said, but where's my son gone? And I had to go through that period of grief and loss. And my husband and I actually had a ceremony one day, and I think it was about 6 months after she'd come out, and we'd had a shit year. It wasn't just that, it was lots of other things happened in our life. A nephew was murdered. My father died. This is in 6 months. Lots of things happened that we had to deal with. My husband was diagnosed with epilepsy, and we just had a bad year. So we'd heard about a little thing, like a ritual that you could perhaps do. And our ritual was, on New Year's Eve that year, we buried a lemon. And we wrote the year on the lemon. We went to the supermarket and chose the biggest lemon we could find. It was out of season, you know, lemons weren't... It was probably an American lemon, bugger it. And we wrote 1997 in black texture. And my husband and I, there was no one else at home. We dug a big hole, and he said, "Is that deep enough?" I said, "No." Another shovelful. And we put that lemon in that hole and we buried it. And from then on we decided that we would move forward. And, you know, the old cliched sayings, when life gives you lemons, you've got to make lemonade, so we tried to do that. I no longer remember her as male, looking male. I have the photos, I have the memories, but they're sort of put away in that cupboard over there to be brought out on a rare occasion. She had a couple of relationships with a couple of guys, and they were abusive, totally abusive to her. And she now has a female partner, and she doesn't really like having titles or what's the other word? Labels put on her. So she would accept being a lesbian woman, but she just said she loves her for how she is, like what you said, she loves the person. And they've been together 13 years last week. My sister absolutely refuses to speak about my daughter as in the feminine. She said, "I love him, he's my nephew, and I'll always love him." And I think, well, I love my sister too, and on every other aspect we get along well. She lives in Sydney, so I don't see her very often. And I said my piece once, and I said, "Do you realise how hurtful it is to refer to her in the male gender, and how hurtful it is to me?" And she had a big blue with her daughter, but still refuses to change.